Hello, my name is RIIVO. I'm an Estonian entrepreneur, and I'm going to talk about failures. And as I've been an angel investor for last maybe 6 or 7 years, I'm going to take a perspective of an investor really. And although I'm going to talk about startups, I believe that whatever I'm going to say, it might also apply for traditional sectors, or even maybe these things apply for public sector initiatives such as public policies. And of course, fails are something that have been, researched for a long time, and there are many theories how to, avoid them and so on and so forth. I believe they are all actually correct, but I'm going to present my sort of own experience. A couple of words about myself. I have been an entrepreneur all my life. When I was a student, 16 years ago, I founded a management consulting company, which has now grown into staff of around 200 in 10 countries. But around maybe 6 years ago, I discovered that consulting is actually a very hard business, especially in terms of scaling, because if you want to make an extra buck, you need to spend an extra hour. And I was not a very corporate guy either, so I decided to start doing investments, and mainly into technology companies. This is my current portfolio. These are all ICT B2B startups. There are a couple of more, but they didn't fit the slide. So anyways, I have 2 exits and 1 proved failure. And I hope that in the future there will be more exits, but I'm afraid that there are going to be also more fails. So let me introduce my experience from that. So in early stage, you really invest into teams, into people. And according to my experience, really, if something goes wrong, it also goes wrong because of people. And the phenomena that I've discovered, I've called FLL. And maybe some of you have been recently in Hollywood, then you might recognize that actually the airport in Hollywood is called the same, but that's not what I mean. Actually, FLL means the following. First, things tend to go wrong if someone is a fool. If we talk about technology investments and maybe innovation, it's actually very easy to be a fool, because innovation by its essence means something new, so it also means that there is a lack of experience, and things can go wrong because it's just testing. So by being fool, I mean lacking experience, but also maybe not understanding things or how things work. So that's the first reason. The second reason I think is worse. If someone is a liar. That is connected to fraud, to any kind of things that are purposely done wrong. So I have personally not had many experiences with that kind of problems, but still I've heard that they exist and can actually direct things southwards very easily. And last L is a lazy. And in startup world, lazy is actually something that can come around quite easily over the long period of time. Startup life is very exhausting, very intensive, and in the long run, people just get tired, they lack motivation, and become lazy. So these all things are actually connected to human beings. And I've discovered that early stage investing is actually not that much of a financial affair, but it's rather a psychological affair. you need to charge somehow whether the team you are investing in is going to be a failure or not. And then you need to understand, this human nature thing. I think many of you have seen this Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When you're coming from Estonia, you might want to add one additional layer, which is Wi-Fi, the basic. In any case, by the theory, you need to have a shelter, food, couple of other things. Maybe people from Pornhub can explain those. And then you develop further, and this is how human nature works. However, in my view, this is, especially in startup life, this is a theory. In reality, maybe a startup founder's hierarchy of needs looks like something like this. First, you will have, a t-shirt and a hoodie to identify yourself. At some point, you will buy a Tesla, maybe not. And then the problem with this hierarchy is that you get lazy once you climb the ladder. And from the investor point of view, that is a problem. By the way, this is not my own theory. I actually stole it from the internet, but I believe that this is very relevant. So from the investor point of view, this ladder is actually dangerous because people might get lazy. So the conflict is that an investor would think that, a startup founder's hierarchy of needs should look something like this. First, you don't want to steal, stay on a legal side. Then you always need to have cash, because if there is a company failure, it always ends with no cash. I mean, that is the practical reason why most of the companies really fail. And then you need to make your customers happy, users happy, you start earning profit, and if it's all good, you might go to one of those fancy events in Davos. So, as you can see, there are a lot of contradictions depending on the perspective you're looking from. And to try to avoid failure, you should really try to understand what this particular team is about and how to keep their motivation alive and how to keep them away from lying, from being too comfortable or lazy, and how to encourage them to learn all the time. Personally, I use, when making investments, such a decision tree, which is also very much founder concentrated or founder focused. First, you always want to invest into awesome founders. And if there is an awesome founder and an awesome market, really fast growing, for example, and if the founder and the market fit with each other, meaning that the founder is actually not a fool on that market, you could really consider investing even without any traction or even without the product being ready. If something goes wrong, that, for example, the founder is really attractive, but the market is not that fast developing, then the founder needs to be really good, because there is a tendency that markets always win, and even good founders on bad markets will be failures. In any case, if there is not an awesome founder, there is almost no way to invest. You will know that probably it will be a failure anyway, unless there is a lot of traction, so that the market has proved that even with not an awesome founder, this could be a business. So coming back to FLL, I think the good news is that you can really fix fool and lazy. Fool can be fixed by learning, and lazy can be fixed, I guess, by talking and motivating. The bad news, of course, is that I think liar cannot be fixed. So out of the 3 reasons of failure, I guess liar is the worst one, because there is a few, if any, things you can do about it. And I would like to conclude with the final remark that one thing is sure, that giving up is actually the only sure way to fail. Thank you. Any questions? No? Thank you.
Are there any questions? No questions? I have a question. How many times an entrepreneur have to fail to be sure that he will not fail once again?
Well, I think there are many right answers. Actually, yesterday we came together with Ryan, who spoke previously, and he saw the headline of the presentation and said, "Oh, fails suck." So he said that maybe it's good not to fail at all, but I guess there are two really views on that. You can fail many times and learn out of it, which is correct. And I think if you can somehow prevent failing, it's also very good. So I don't know whether there is a concrete number, really.
Thank you. There is another question. Please present yourself before addressing the question.
I'm Valerie, and I would like to ask, of course, if we give up, it's like the surest way to fail, but do you know if you can actually know and find out if you're gonna fail? I mean, you're starting up a business or something and you want to know. I mean, you don't have the possibility to know for sure if your startup would be a success. But is there any way to find out if it's gonna be a fail? Apart from giving up, of course.
Well, there's no definite way for sure, but I guess it really depends on the trend first, and secondly, I think it might also. Giving an example of a trend, if you would maybe establish a taxi operations company nowadays, you can be pretty sure that in 10 years it could be, dead, more or less. So I think trend is your friend. And secondly, it's all about team. If you do not have all of the necessary aspects of the team covered, I think the team becomes sort of a fool. And I think that adds a certain probability of failure for the future. So I think there's no definite way to charge failure, but there are some things that need to be in place to have higher hope for success. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that would be all. Our question? Oh, there is another question.
I wanted to leave already before. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Yulia.
Hello.
Many peers, many experts that have given presentations before said it's about people. You as well. My question is, how do you define FLL? Give us an example, like what's being foolish, what's being a liar, and what's being the other thing, lazy?
Yeah, well, I think I can use an example of myself. For example, one of the companies that has failed where I was actually a lead investor. So I consider myself a fool in that respect because I didn't do a good enough due diligence on the team. So I think it particularly failed because a team was a fool, but they made me being even a greater fool because investing there without the proper due diligence on the team. So I think that's the example of a fool. A liar thing, you know, any fraud, somebody does something that's either not legal or not in line with maybe proper business standards. And lazy is just loss of motivation usually, I think. People get just exhausted. You've done the same thing over and over again, and you get tired. So I think from the previous presentations, it's that there was a good learning point that if you start a company, you really need to be sure that you can bear with the company at least, I don't know, 5, 7 years, something like this. It's a long journey. Thank you.
Thank you. More questions? There is another one. Great. I love questions.
Hi, my name is Victor. I wanted to ask you, when do you understand that it's time to give up on an idea or on a failed, I don't know, initiative? How do you understand it? Because it's very good to put a lot of effort and to try to make your best on something, but sometimes you just have to let go. And
yeah, thank you for this question. I think it's a very good one. But the pity that I don't have such a good answer to this. But I think you can actually try to analyze it in a way that you will try to have on one side of the scale everything that you have done already, and on the other scale what you could do if you didn't have this project. So and then you see like which of them makes more sense. I think that's one of the ways. Of course, for investors there are many guidelines, you know, from the financial authorities that you should write it off when something happens. In terms of companies, usually you need to write it off once there's no cash. I mean, if there's no money, you need to close down for a long period. I think the financial regulations say it's like 3 or 6 months.
Thank you very much. So tomorrow would be a startup competition,
yes,
right? And you will be in the jury.
I'll be on a plane, unfortunately.
Ah, okay, cool. So there would be a jury.
Thank you.
So I invite you also tomorrow to watch the startup competition, to see the startups and to think, to judge for yourself if there is some signs of a failure or success. Thank you very much.
Thank you.